Well, Dave, we've talked a lot about Vegas odds and looking at power rankings, and that's what you do before the preseason. We don't have a sense of what teams are ultimately going to look like. But I think we're both sort of taken aback by the lack of confidence in the Seahawks and the overall win total. And I know the goal is to get people to bet on both sides of the wager, but I think they set the mark at 7.5 wins for the Seahawks, which seems actually it's better than it was last year going at this point. But the fact that nobody seems to believe this is a playoff team. So you and I are going to come up with 5 reasons as to why this is a playoff team this year. And start with our number 5 today. You go first.
Yeah, I'm going to go with an individual in this case, and it's Devon Witherspoon. I just think he is such an important player. Now, did he play poorly last year? No, he did not. He played really well. But, you look at some of his numbers from his rookie year, he needs to play a little bit more like that. I mean, he had an interception for a touchdown, obviously the 97-yard touchdown that he had on Monday night. He had 3 sacks, but he also had a sack that was called back because of a penalty and another interception, and he had a bunch of big hits, and he just was all over the field. Last year he played great. I don't think anybody would say he played poorly, but I'd like to see him get those numbers back up and him start making more plays. And I think once you get settled into a defense that you start to, feel like, okay, now I can kind of play outside of that defense. I can go and, take chances and, try to do things differently. But Spoon is such an unbelievable player. And I think the one thing last year that really stood out to me was that he is a moving target constantly. It would be like being at a gun range and trying to hit a target that's just constantly moving around. And he made a play last year against Arizona out on the edge where there was a blocker there, and he just couldn't get his hands on Spoon because he is he just so much energy, man. You look at the way that he plays. But look, I'm just saying their best player needs to have his best season. And I think being settled into the second year with this defense, I think that's going to be huge for him.
Well, and we talked about him yesterday on the air, and we were going through the ESPN's top 10 list of defensive tackles, and Jalen Carter was like number 4 or 3. Right. And we were talking about, Jalen Carter, he was a consideration for the Seahawks. Who would you rather have? And you and I are both hands down Witherspoon. And we had somebody text in and say, you guys are homers. Defensive tackle is a game wrecker. A cornerback can be schemed against. And we're like, well, why couldn't you scheme against? You can scheme against any one individual you want. Those are the guys you talk about, the extra meeting guys.
Right.
And with a defensive tackle, they're pretty much where they're going to be the entire game. With Witherspoon, he's on the outside, he's on the inside, he's like almost like a middle linebacker. He's rushing the passer, he's dropping into coverage. He's everywhere. So scheming him, certainly you could. It's a lot harder. Yeah. It's a lot harder. So he's multiple, as they like to say. So I agree with you. He's huge. For me, my number 5 is Ernest Jones. This defense changed when he got here. And it's hard to measure his impact and say, well, he's responsible for this guy's turnaround and that guy's turnaround. The one guy you could point to is Tyrese Knight and say, look at the impact he had overall on the defense, because it felt like a light switch. The day he got here, all of a sudden everybody in the defense as a whole started trending better.
Right.
Tyrese Knight grew up quick. I felt under his watchful eye, if you will. So I think his impact was huge. And now you get him from the beginning of the year. You get him from training camp to preseason to the very first game of the year through the whole season. I just think having him at the beginning, he's familiar with the defense, year 2 for him. He's not a new guy anymore. He's an established presence out there. His impact was remarkable. I never would have predicted that. I never would have thought a middle linebacker, all due respect, that a middle linebacker coming over could have had that kind of impact. And again, it's not just him. You don't want to, go over the top. But the defense had a pretty dramatic turnaround after he got here.
They absolutely did. And it took him a couple of games to get going, and and we'll talk about that a little bit later. But as far as the defensive numbers go, but yeah, I mean, when he got there, it took him a little while. And, you think about it, they traded him, the Rams, that is, to Tennessee, and then all of a sudden he's on a plane back to Seattle. He ends up playing the Rams in the second game that he got here, and the very first game was against Buffalo, and he had just played them in Tennessee, so it was just kind of a strange situation. But once he got settled in, you could see that he definitely had an effect on Tyrese Knight that you mentioned. And yeah, I mean, he was huge as far as an individual player goes.
How big is it that he gets a full training camp now? He's got this. He's got the defense down. Obviously, he knows the system. But it's his first full season with the team, and he gets to go through OTAs. He gets to go through mini camp and training camp and preseason, and be there in game one. Second year with Mike McDonald. It's kind of exciting for me to imagine, all right, if that's who he was coming in off the street, didn't come to training camp with these guys, he's with a completely different team, different system, and that's the impact he had. What's it like if he's there from day one?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, you come in the middle of the season and, you're trying to be a leader, but you also don't want to step on people's toes, and you're trying to get the defense down. So to answer your question, I think it's huge that he's going to be able to go through training camp and, hit the ground running. And hopefully the numbers that they finished with defensively are going to be something they begin with.
Yeah. And he's also a guy that, his presence tells you if he goes down, who do they have? That's something we've talked about is depth. And all right, if this guy's not there, this guy, we feel confident in him. It does expose one of the weaknesses, and that would just be the depth of that. Right. Not that he's weak, but if he goes down, what do you do?
Yeah.
So that's kind of the one area he's such a presence that you look at the possibility everybody can get hurt. If that happens to him, who's the guy that steps up?
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think that's one of the things that probably is left. I mean, we talked about depth because Mike, after the OTAs, was talking about corner, saying, okay, the 3, number 4, and number 5 guy are going to have to battle it out. Well, they end up bringing in Shaquille Griffin. So, you feel pretty good about the depth there. At least you got lots of choices. Not a lot of choice. I mean, we'll see. Maybe Pat O'Connell or maybe Drake Thomas steps up. I like Drake Thomas. I thought he looked great. He's a little undersized, but he is a guy that made some plays last year. So that would be the one thing, I would worry a little bit about as far as depth goes. Of course, everybody's always going to say offensive line, more choices there. But I think inside backer to me is sort of glaring. And we always talk about this. The middle of the defense is really important to this defense. When they're playing well, and you saw at the end of the year, Big Cat started making plays, and so that inside part of it is very, and especially getting everybody on the same page. If now all of a sudden you have to go to a guy like Drake Thomas, he doesn't have that experience. So, it would be, I would feel better about maybe a little bit more depth there. But Ernest Jones, I mean, he's been huge for this team.
All right, so there's our number 5 reason that the Seahawks will make the playoffs. Dave and I are going to take you reason by reason, starting with 5. He wanted to start with 1, but we're going to start with 5. Coming up, we're going to give you reason number 4 the Seahawks are a playoff team this season.